Hello there, guys. Welcome to the MCU podcast. I'm the MCU guy, and we've made it to 2022. I bet none of us thought we'd get here, did we? But we're here. We are here, and that's the most important part. We are actually trialing streaming on Twitch as well for this episode of the podcast. I'm excited to be joined by fellow Twitcher and all-round good dude, and one of my favorite people to be on this podcast. We've got Master Michael Coffin, aka the AvengNerd. Hello, Michael. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm glad to be back. How are you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm very, very good. I'm very good. It's been a bit strange because the whole of like the last 2 years, everyone's been talking about COVID and all that kind of stuff, and we've had to do all these Zoom calls and Zoom chats and podcasts over this way. And you know what? I never really thought too much about it because during this whole time, never had COVID until last week. I got
Really?
2 years in, and I missed COVID, and then it's Omicron variant. It got me.
I had no idea.
So
I haven't gotten it yet.
Have you still not got it?
Nope.
Well, you don't want it, man. It's not cool. I weren't expecting it to be a bad thing. But it floored me for a few days, which is weird because I had a booster jab 2 days before I got it as well. So all very strange, but it finally got me. The Rona got me. But this is like the first day that I've managed to be well enough to be able to get out of bed and.
Well, you look great. You look and you sound great. You don't even look. You don't. I would never guess you were sick.
Well, no. Technically, I'm not sick now. I tested negative today, so that's good. Woo!
That is good news.
The Rona has left me, which is very, very good. But let's talk about the Rona because I'm hoping that this is it's on its way out now. I'm hoping it's going to be pushed out the door. How's things for yourself, man? How was your Christmas and your New Year?
Christmas and New Year's was great. I had Christmas off for the first time probably in 3 years. So we got to go to my uncle's house for the first time in 10 years after his wife had passed away 10 years ago. So that was really nice, kind of reminiscent of some family memories. But it was a nice change to be back, kind of back to a sense of normalcy. And we didn't do like a gift exchange or nothing like that. We just had supper together and got to see all the grandkids and cousins and all that stuff. So it was cool. New Year's was really, really good. Even though I had to work, I'm on night shift, so I still got to spend the day with my family. And we ended up going to Spider-Man No Way Home. Actually, we're talking about that later. We went to that as a family, and I got to watch my sister and my mom's reactions to some of the bigger moments. That was cool because I had seen it. I had seen it on the night of the premiere. So
yeah.
It was good. I'm not a gift receiver, if that makes sense. Like I don't like people ask me like, what do you want for Christmas? And I never want anything. Yeah. So there was some kind of unexpected gifts that were nice. I got a book called Get Back that was talking about the Beatles documentary. So
nice.
I love the Beatles. So that was like kind of like my highlight. It was nice. How about you?
Christmas was good. Just a lot of time with the family. My niece is 3, so it's pretty much all about her.
Always,
which is fantastic. I started drinking pretty early during the day. I think it was about 10 a.m. I had a bit of Bucks Fizz, so a bit of champagne and orange juice at 10 a.m. Just carried on throughout the day. The missus was at work though throughout the day, so I didn't really get to spend much time with her. And then she came down with Rona on Boxing Day, so that kind of ruined our makeshift Christmas. And then we had one day between Boxing Day and New Year's where we weren't stuck inside. I went and got a Spider-Man tattoo. I got the MCU.
That's so cool, dude. I love that
Spider-Man logo. I got that on the Monday, and then Rona hit me on the Tuesday, and then that's it. I've been in the whole time, so I've not really had a New Year. We managed to have a drink, me and the missus, because we quarantined at my house, which was nice. Sure. But it's been not a lot going on. We promised ourselves we were going to make loads of progress with loads of TV shows, and we didn't. We just rewatched The Office pretty much from season 5 onwards. Finished the last episode today, which is brilliant. But we did watch 4 episodes of Hawkeye because she's not seen it yet. But
It's so good.
again, that's something we're going to talk about in a second. I'd already watched it the week prior. I binge watched the whole season in space of a day because I was waiting. I was holding off to watch it. I shouldn't hold off really watching it because I think the way the episodes fell, it would have ruined something for me anyway. So I'm glad I watched it the way I watched it.
Yeah, me too.
Well, not ruined it, but it would have been a bit like, oh, I'm half expecting a certain thing to happen because of it. So I'm kind of glad I watched it after I'd watched Spider-Man Far From Home the first 3 times because I've seen it 4 times now.
And
I'll be going again as soon as I'm allowed out of this house, which is tomorrow. So I might go watch it tomorrow night as well. But yeah, it was overall decent. I mean, it's like I said, like we've pretty much said a lot of times on these podcasts, it's strange time. Can't really predict anything, so you kind of just got to go with the flow. And although it was a quiet Christmas and New Year's for me, I had a nice time anyway. And what made it even better was the fact that we had some actual really, really cool MCU content in December to see us through the year. So we were gonna start with Hawkeye, but I'll tell you what we might as well start with. Let's have a start with some highlights from the last year, well, from 2021 in regards to the MCU. So we got 4 TV shows, WandaVision, Falcon Winter Soldier, Loki, and Hawkeye. And we got 3 films, 4 films, sorry. Black Widow, Eternals, Shang-Chi, and Spider-Man No Way Home. So for you, Michael, what would you say the highlight of the year was for you in terms of MCU stuff?
I mean, so a lot of people would say like the obvious answer would probably be No Way Home, but I'm not going to lie to you. As much as I loved it, and I do think it was the best movie that came out in the year, clearly like everybody else is going to, I think one that's kind of getting overlooked and that was a big highlight was actually the Eternals. And for me, the Eternals was big. And I know it was like a slower paced movie because they had so much to explain as to like who these guys were and like why didn't they help with Thanos type thing. But the movie did a good job of explaining that. And then not only did it do that, but it opened up so many more doors for future stories in the MCU to happen, like with Galactus possibly, and like other outer space entities. And I think people are kind of forgetting how big of a door opener that film was for like the whole future of the MCU. Because now like the rumors, there's like 21 rumored movies or projects after that movie came out. So it's like, I mean, that was a huge highlight for me was the Eternals, and I got to go to it with my mom, so it was kind of nice to just go to me and my mom just went to a movie together, and we had a good time. So
that's cool. No, I can understand where you're coming from there. You are right with the Eternals being massively overlooked as a film that really made a big impact this year, and I mean, like visually, I think it's probably up there one of the best ones in the MCU in recent years. And storyline, I think a lot of people want to poke holes in it and they want to like try and downplay it with how cool it was, but it was quite refreshing. And we're going to hark back to the point where it's not your average superhero film. It's not your average MCU film. There's more to it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think you are right. It is massively overlooked, but I think I'm going to go kind of the same vein. But I'm going to say Shang-Chi was really surprisingly good, and
so good.
I remember leaving the film and being like, "Wow, that was incredible!" Like it got a bit mad towards the end with what happened because I weren't expecting it, but it was done in such a cool way, and everyone was writing it off even before it started. Like as soon as you get past Endgame, and we had Spider-Man No Way Home coming out, Spider-Man Far From Home coming out, and everyone was like, right, this could be it. This could make or break the MCU. These next couple of movies could like really like shape what's going to happen. As in, like people could just stop giving a shit now, and people just and there could be like a load of flops coming. And I think a lot of like the media was gearing up for that to be the case. I think they kind of secretly wanted these films to not do very well, and then you get films like Shang-Chi and Black Widow like outperforming where they should be during a pandemic, and you can't do anything but like applaud the guys behind these films for doing such amazing jobs for them. And for me, Shang-Chi was the most surprising one of the year because again, we could all easily say that Spider-Man's obviously the best film, and it was technically the best film.
Yeah.
But it's so easy to get caught up in the hype and then forget about all of the good stuff that had throughout the year. So, the underdogs really, really overperformed this year. So for me, that's how I felt.
The highlight for like the TV shows for me, I would say, is a tie between really all of them. Like I can't say that one was better than the other. And I know that like the last time we talked, we were saying how like, well, I think this one's better than the other one, but like looking at like the whole impact of like the future of like the next products coming with like Multiverse of Madness and like Wanda being a part of that, and Strange and Loki branching out the multiverse, and Hawkeye bringing back fan favorites. We'll get into that obviously. But like for me, it was a tie on like the TV shows. They all just crushed it. Even with like their backs against the wall, like Falcon and the Winter Soldier having to be essentially kind of rewritten, being too close to the story of the pandemic, and like having to cut a bunch of stuff out and reorder the story. I still think that all these shows were like they were all equally important to like a bigger cause of what's coming down the pipeline. So, but what did you think like of the TV shows, I guess?
Well, the thing is, I've recently rewatched like the whole MCU of the past, I'd say 4 months, because the missus had never watched them, and so we were pretty much building up towards Spider-Man No Way Home. That was like that was my thing at the start when we started. I was like, as long as we get it all done before No Way Home, then we should be fine. So having to rewatch all the shows was really cool, and I'm really glad I did it. Although obviously it weren't that long ago since I watched them originally, but watching the show the second time round really made me appreciate certain shows more than others. Loki, the first time round, I was a bit underwhelmed by it, but watching it second time round, I really took it in a lot more, and I properly enjoyed it a bit more. That being said, I didn't enjoy Falcon and Winter Soldier as much as I did the first time round.
I can see that.
I think it's easier to spot the rewrites watching second time after knowing what we know, and like having to digest everything and listen to interviews and talk about and listen to the cast and crew and Kevin Feige talking about the challenges they had, and then with the Assemble documentary that came out as well, and having them talk about the struggles and all that kind of stuff, you can actually pinpoint certain bits throughout the show where you knew it should have been a different storyline, and it's a bit not annoying, but it's frustrating because we could have had something probably a tiny bit better than what we had. Not to say it was bad, because it wasn't bad at all. It really suffered from stuff that was out with their hands completely, and the guys, the team that pulled that off, and it's just a bit of a shame. And the good thing there's a lot of good that came out of it though. So you can't like I said, you can't completely write them off, and you can't say that some shows aren't as good as others, and you can't really challenge them on that kind of stuff, because they all had the really, really good bits anyway. So yeah, I would probably side with what you're saying. Is again, no show really is better than the other. They've both, all the shows elevated all the characters that were involved in the shows to a higher level and made them far more important going forward in the MCU. Some more than others maybe, but I just thought it's just so impressive to see the way that they pulled these shows off in a cinematic way, like they did, like LucasArts have done with Lucasfilm have done with The Mandalorian. Like these big budget TV shows, they are just, there's something else, aren't they? Really.
And like what I appreciate about like the Marvel shows too, that was kind of like something that maybe might not have been talked about a whole bunch yet, was how it was like, you get your Netflix shows that always have like 13 episodes and like there's a whole lot of filler. And like they'd have like these big cliffhangers, and you wait 3 episodes for that cliffhanger to be continued on. And like I was kind of scared that was going to be a thing with like the Disney Plus shows. But like when I saw the episode count, I was like, 6 episodes. 8 episodes. Like one of them I think was 10. It was like, okay, well, like I wonder why these are like such short seasons. And it was because they were literally like just kind of like giving you the meat and potatoes of the storyline right away, just like bam, bam, bam. Like there was no waiting. Like right at the beginning of the next episode, you're getting the continued story from the last cliffhanger that you saw. And it wasn't just like a little 30-second tease. It was like a 3, 4, 5 minute scene, You know, like you were getting everything you were kind of expecting or hoping for going into the next episode, which was nice because there wasn't that filler nonsense that a lot of shows kind of struggle from. So
yeah, I mean, I completely understand what you're saying, because a lot of shows have too many character angles and too many overlapping stories that kind of just convolute everything, and you're like, well, there's no real need for us to be checking in with this character. There's not loads of characters in each show, so they kind of keep everything within one storyline, essentially. I mean, there's like offshoots and there's like little things that you need to keep your eye on, but it's not like they're not going off on mad tangents and they're not all like being linked together finally at the end. It's quite a straightforward plot with most of them, which it's what you need sometimes, because I mean, if they are targeting to what their audience is, which a lot of time is going to be like the younger audience with these shows, then it works a lot better, because you're essentially doing what you do in the films, but on a smaller scale, slightly smaller scale, and over a longer period of time, but in a way that doesn't really make it boring. So yeah, I thought they were all fantastic. To be fair, they all did a really, really good job. So carrying on from the highlights of 2021. What would you say you're most looking forward to in 2022? I mean, we've got quite a few movies, and we've got quite a few shows coming. What would you say is your most excited project going forward in 2022?
Seeing what I've seen for like future projects at this point, I don't know if Fantastic Four is going to be a 2022 project. Is it? It is.
I'm not sure, actually. I wouldn't have thought so, because I don't even think they've finished casting yet, have they, for Fantastic Four? I think they are in the process of casting, but I don't think they've got an actual cast yet, which means I think it'd be pretty difficult for them to try and get something out before the end of the year. Not to say it's impossible, but I would have thought it would be more summertime 2023. I'd go with.
I would get, yeah. If Fantastic Four had been a 2022 project, I think that would have been it. Just because John Watts is directing it, and he handled Spider-Man with so much care and passion that, like, obviously we had one of the best Spider-Man trilogies I think that we're ever going to get. And then, but like, if for an actual 2022 project, probably I think we'll get it pretty early on with Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness, because there's a lot of ties to What If. Like with his episode, so just from the trailer alone that we've seen. So I would say Multiverse of Madness, because there's a whole lot of rumors flying around about that movie now too, that like some of the X-Men from like the Fox universe are going to make appearances, and just because it's the multiverse is a concept that we are starting to know frightening a little more about now.
Nice.
So like we're gonna see some more of this stuff, and what doors have opened here. So like I feel like it's going to be a big project because it's Doctor Strange, but also because it's going to give some relevancy and importance to some of the other movies that we've all grown up watching. And there's the nostalgia factor with it, but putting all that aside, I think it's fair for like the former actors and directors and writers for those movies, because obviously they know that their movies have kind of been overshadowed by their importance of like, what the MCU has done, how it's like, oh, well, they just kind of washed everything that we did. But like, I feel like that movie's going to give some like credibility to like all the people that have worked on those movies in the past, to say, hey, what you did in the past is important, and we're going to involve it in the story of this movie, and we're going to even have some cameos and appearances of those characters, because this character was really well done, and this storyline was really well done. Maybe you guys didn't do everything perfect, but we're still going to bring the parts that were done really well in the forefront. I hope that they do that. So I think that'd be kind of nice for those actors and directors and writers to feel like, hey, like our movies did really matter at the end of the day. So
yeah. Well, the thing about the multiverse of madness and what they did quite well in Spider-Man No Way Home is like you said, they've given a nod to these past films and these past franchises that that a lot of people have, like, not forgotten about, but people have always been like, oh god, it'd be so good if it was actually part of the MCU canon. Right. And now we're given these opportunities now with the multiverse where it all can be and it can all be linked. Doesn't necessarily mean it's part of the main MCU, and people may come and go in this situation, especially like I said with the cameos rumored for Multiverse of Madness. It's just a fantastic way to kind of just tick every box possible before they go and start something new with like a new version of the X-Men and Fantastic Four. Like it's not disregarding anything that's come before it. Like I said, it's appreciating what we've had, but then being like, okay, but now we are actually going to move on to this point. But you've had your time in the sun, and we appreciate everything you've done. Now let's kick on with some of these new guys. And it wouldn't surprise me if we did get a complete reboot of the X-Men, but it'll just and it's I don't think it'll cause that much of an uproar when we get to see the likes of maybe Wolverine appear in Multiverse Madness and Charles Xavier and even fantastic members of the Fantastic Four. Maybe Chris Evans might reappear and get his flame on. We never know. That'd be cool. But then obviously we can move forward and we can the MCU can attack it in the way that they do, and they'll make a success out of it regardless. So I think that's a really clever thing to do. And my only like issue with that is the fact that I don't want it to take away how good that film could be,
right? Just
as a Doctor Strange film. Like Doctor Strange, it's not like he's being shit on at the moment, but he got done in by a kid in No Way Home, essentially.
And, I still don't know what to think about that yet.
And I don't want him to go into his own second solo film where he's not the best part of it. Like, he needs to be the best part of that film. And obviously with him being the main villain, which we think is going to be the main villain, obviously, if that trailer gives us anything to go off, then he's going to be the main villain and not Wanda like everyone thought. Then he needs to make sure that he's still the main focus of that film and that it's continuing his story arc and his progression through the MCU. Because if they bring in an Illuminati film at some point, which I'm hoping they do, like Doctor Strange needs to be the leader of that. And
for real,
we need to make sure his character isn't just kind of pushed to the background of his own solo film. So all the cameos, really excited for the prospect of all of that, but let's make sure that we're not taking away the main focus of the film, because even in Spider-Man No Way Home, like we'll probably talk about it more in detail, but Tom Holland was never not the main focus of that film,
right?
Even in the points where he should have been, where he should have, like, people should have just like completely forgotten all about him, he's still carrying that film forward, and it was great to see. And that's how you do that film right, is by making sure you're not taking the main focus away from the main character. And as long as they can do that, then, and I'm hope that Sam Raimi can do that, then I think that will possibly be one of the best films that we're going to see in recent years. Maybe even better than No Way Home.
And he's such a good director too. I mean, we've seen what he can do with these characters correctly with like Spider-Man 1 and 2. So especially Spider-Man 2. So like if he can give us anything of that caliber and like still keep the focus on Doctor Strange as the main character, and being in charge of the whole movie, I agree.
Yeah.
What project are you excited for?
I probably would have gone for Multiverse of Madness as well, but tell you what, I'm really looking forward to Thor 4, man. I think that's gonna be so cool. Like some of the set fixture look you've seen from that, it just looks like a really, really fun film. And I watched Jojo Rabbit a few nights ago. Have you seen Jojo Rabbit?
I've not.
It's Taika Waititi's film. He plays like a camp version of Hitler, who's his imaginary friend of a young lad. Scarlett Johansson's in it as well. It's a fantastic film. I urge you to watch it.
It's a good watch.
But it just reminded me of how good Taika is at bringing like the quirkiness through in some of these films. And Thor Ragnarok was phenomenal, and he's up there, one of my best MCU films.
Well, didn't he help?
I just go on.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Finish.
I'm just excited for the prospect of what that film could be, with obviously Natalie Portman returning as well and being the mighty Thor. And I saw a picture of Tessa Thompson in a new her new suit for the film, where I think she looks like she's Thor as well. She's got like the circle armor that looks a lot like Thor's had in the past. So I just think there's going to be, especially with the Guardians being in it as well, I can't see how that's not going to be an amazing film, especially when you look at how good they were together in Infinity War. Like the chemistry between the Guardians and Thor was just on point. And even if they're not in the film for that long, it's still something to really look forward to. And yeah, I think it's probably it'll be hard pressed to not be as good maybe as Multiverse of Madness. I know it's a bold statement because that's going to be an incredible film, but I think it's going to be a different kind of film, but it's still going to be like a really, really fun MCU film.
I think it's going to be one of those movies that it's kind of like it's going to connect with a certain audience, and like given like obviously like it's going to connect with a lot of people who love music. Like like with the Guardians being the Guardians. And like the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtracks and all that stuff, it's going to really connect with everybody. But there's going to be that select group of musicians and people who just are passionate about music that's going to really, really connect with on a deeper level, where like they enjoy the film 10 times more than like other people, you know what I mean? And I'm one of those people. I love the Guardians films. I think it's been a long time since we've seen them in anything. I mean, even though it's, you know, we can say, oh, it was that they were in Endgame, right? But it's actually been a while since Endgame now. Like they haven't been in a whole lot with also with like the controversy that was going on with like, you know, James Gunn at the time and all of that. So that was kind of a big roadblock for them, because I think their last movie was supposed to come out sometime last year. And it was. Yeah. And it's, I mean, now I think a month ago they just started shooting. So it's gonna be nice to see the Guardians in another project, because it's been a while. Yeah,
it is. So what about TV shows? I mean, we've got a few to look forward to. We've got Moon Knight, Ms. Marvel, and there's another one. I can't remember which one is coming out. Secret Invasion as well. I think that's I think that's this year as well. And there's one more. And I can't remember for the life of me. We'll have to come back to it, but I can't. Yeah, it's not Road War. It's not Road Wars. It's not Road Wars.
It's Armor Wars.
Armor Wars. It's not that one, is it?
It is Armor Wars. Yep.
Is it that one? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, who really knows what? I've said nothing. She-Hulk. Let's not forget about She-Hulk. So yeah, out of them, which one do you reckon you're most looking forward to? Because I'm torn. I'm torn between Moon Knight and She-Hulk. To be fair, She-Hulk looks like it could be a lot of fun, and with the potential of another couple of cameos from someone's favorite blind lawyer, it could really step up its game. That. But Moon Knight looks really, really cool as well. I don't really know much about Moon Knight. I've done a bit of reading about Mr. Spectre, but I'm not completely clued up on about it. But Oscar Isaac's amazing, and I'm pretty sure it'll be a really, really good show. That, and it looks like a lot of it's taking place in England, which is always a good thing. More England-based things, please. So I'll take it. So I think, like I said, She-Hulk probably will be the highlight of the year, really, for me in terms of the show, just because we're getting Mark Ruffalo back. Always good to have Mark Ruffalo back. I think it might be quite a quirky show, and if Matt Murdock does return for the show, then again, it's something to get more excited about, with the possibility of more Netflix people. We'll probably touch more about that in the next two discussions. But for me, I think that's the like She-Hulk is probably the one I'm most looking forward to. What about yourself?
I'm gonna say my number one is probably gonna be Secret Invasion.
Yep.
It's been a long time since we've seen Nick Fury, and obviously we got the nod about him in No Way Home being off world for the last year. Like even the Department of Damage Control knows that Nick Fury has been. They know where he's at. They know he's off world. So, I think that's going to be a really big show, just because it's going to answer a lot of questions as to, like, you know, what sword is for the people who don't know what it is, and like why he's making it, like what the relationship with the Skrulls is. Because I know that, like, with Captain Marvel, it's going to be easy to say, oh well, they're the good guys, but maybe something happens in Secret Invasion where something changes. You know, we're like, okay, now we got a problem, because maybe they end that show on a cliffhanger to go into like an Avengers movie where the Skrulls kind of become like the next enemy to Earth. And that's going to lead to like the next Avengers movie, which would be good, because there's obviously, when we get into the discussion of No Way Home, there's a whole lot of like questions about, you know, Peter Parker's future in the MCU. So like what, you know, I think it'll answer a lot of that. And it'll just be nice to see Nick Fury have a lot more screen time, because we haven't seen him really with major screen time probably since what movie did he burn his eye patch?
Age of Ultron?
Yeah. I think that sounds about right, because he wasn't very much of a part of Endgame other than pushing the pager for Captain Marvel. So like we haven't really seen Nick Fury on screen for kind of a very long time. And I kind of want to see how pissed off he is, because obviously, like with everything that's happened with like the time heist and Loki, I kind of want to see what his reaction to everything is, and be like, damn it, guys, like you've really kind of like messed everything up.
I've been off world for one year, and it's all gone to pot. What are you playing at, guys? What are you playing at? And yeah, to be fair, the cast as well is pretty insane for that as well, isn't it? We've got that. She's called Emilia Clarke. She's in it.
Yeah. Yep. She's in it
from Game of Thrones, and I can't remember her name now.
Kobe Smulders coming back.
Kobe Smulders, obviously excited to have her back. And there's also what's she called now? She's in Peep Show, which is something that obviously you don't watch.
Yeah, I don't know.
But
I've heard of it, actually. I've heard of it. I've never watched it, though.
I advise you to watch Peep Show. It's a fantastic British comedy. But I can't remember. She plays Queen Victoria in The Crown, though. Anyway, but she's in it as well. So, plus Ben Mendelsohn coming back as well, isn't he? Taylor, so they'll be back in it. So, which we kind of figured that would be the case, obviously, with it being about the Skrulls. But do you reckon we're going to get an appearance from the other Marvels then? Do we think we're going to get
for sure,
we're going to get Carol popping up?
I don't see how they could do the project without giving you just like a scene with them in it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it don't really need to be about them, does it? Because I mean, they've got their own film anyway. So, but yeah, to bridge the gap, and we know that we like to have lots of cameos from Avengers in some of these shows anyway. So it's really cool. Right. Well, what we'll do is we'll take a short break for podcast listeners. And then we'll come back and we'll talk Hawkeye, then Spider-Man, I think. So we're back in 2 seconds. For all you podcast listeners, we'll see you in 2.
See you later.
So, Scott, as you may be aware, there's a bit of a lockdown on.
Yes, I had heard that.
Lots of people have suddenly got a lot of time on their hands and a smorgasbord of content to choose from to fill that time. How can people find the best nerdy content when there's so much out there?
It's difficult, but don't worry.
Hello there, and welcome back to the MCU podcast, the first podcast of 2022. We've just spent the last 40 minutes or so discussing highlights of 2021 and things to look forward to in 2022. what we're going to do now is we're going to shift it back to 2021, and we're going to talk about the last two MCU projects that we've got that we've not actually managed to speak about on this podcast. I did do a spoiler-free review of Spider-Man No Way Home, but I didn't do a review of Hawkeye, and we didn't manage to do an episode recap like we did with other shows throughout last year. But I'm hoping that next year we'll be able to get back to doing that. If you're down with that, Michael, I'm pretty sure we could do that again, couldn't we?
Yeah,
do the older episode reviews after each one. But
I'm more than willing to go back and do it. Yeah,
sweet. Well, let's get it we'll get that in the books. But for now, let's talk about Hawkeye as a show as a whole. So Hawkeye. Introduction of Kate Bishop. Hawkeye has bad ears now. Just has bad ears. Just took him a long time to discover he has bad ears. People are really, really doing bad things with Steve Rogers' name, putting bad stuff to it. And
Rogers the musical.
Yeah, exactly. And we got the reintroduction or the introduction, depending on how clued up you are in the MCU, not with the non-main MCU, with the Kingpin, Vincent D'Onofrio returning as Kingpin. So, first of all, we might as well talk about the biggest thing to take away from this is the fact that the Kingpin is now in the main MCU, now considered canon, and First of all, let's talk about this version of Kingpin, because this version of Kingpin is not the version of Kingpin from the Daredevil show. Which
there's a lot to talk about there. Yeah,
Vincent D'Onofrio did say this with the same guy though in an interview. Have you seen this interview that he did a few weeks ago, where he said that they are the same person? But I don't understand how they can be the same person. He is literally a watered down version of Kingpin that we got in the Daredevil TV show. It's not that it was a bad version of him, but it was not what I was expecting. What first of all, what did you think about it? Well, first of all, were you happy to see him return, and did you think he lived up to what we wanted him to be in the MCU?
So I wanted him back. I'll start with that. I wanted Vincent D'Onofrio back, and I'm glad that we have him. I will say that. I do think there's a little bit of cleaning up to do. For what the future of his character is in the MCU. So the reason I wanted him back is because he was so iconic in the Daredevil show, and he stole the scene in every scene that he was in. Seeing him back officially, it was surreal and it was exciting, and I still think he nails the part. I actually think power-wise, I think they leveled him up a little bit, just from from some of the fight scenes that we saw where he was just manhandling everybody that was coming at him and that was around him, and he still had that sense of power that he brought on screen in Daredevil, but. The other thing I didn't like about it though was it kind of made him feel like a little too overpowered.
Okay.
In a sense, because she shot him with an arrow, hit him with the bomb. Obviously with the end of Hawkeye, he gets shot when he says even though we don't always see eye to eye, that was a direct rip from a comic with Echo. And so my thoughts is that Kingpin's going to survive that gunshot, but he's going to be blind. And we're going to get in that comic, he's blind until he gets a reconstructive surgery. But there's some encounters between him and Matt Murdock in that comic with him and Kingpin where they it's kind of how does it feel to be blind type thing, So it's one of those things. But I did think it felt a little fake at times, watching get hit by the car and then the explosion. And so I don't know how I really feel about that, if it was good or it was bad yet. But I'm just at this point, I'm glad that Vincent D'Onofrio is back. I don't want him to say any more at this point if it's the same guy or if it's not. The one thing I did like that he said about playing Kingpin and being back was that in his mind, of how he was playing the character, it's as if he got blipped for 5 years, lost control of the city, and that he wants to get his city back.
Okay.
He doesn't feel respected. So I like that storyline wrap up. If that's how they want to tie this to the Netflix shows, I really like that. I think that's a very creative way to bring him in and Matt Murdock in, because like they don't look like they've aged a day, you know. But having Kingpin back was nice. It was refreshing, and I think that it was really cool how they kind of like made little references, and even Hawkeye was like, yeah, that's the guy that I've been telling you about, like that I've been scared shitless of. Like I don't want like I don't want nothing to do with that guy, and I don't want him to know who my family is, because they're really trying to amp up how terrifying this guy is. So and how much of a crime lord that he really is, that even Hawkeye as Ronin was scared of him. So
I can see what you're saying with that.
What do you think?
So I was obviously chuffed to see him back, because D'Onofrio was a fantastic actor, and he was one of the highlights of Daredevil every season for me. Because no matter what you put it down to, it was just Matt versus Kingpin every season. But it was still amazing every season, and he's the kind of bad guy that you'd expect to be doing more, though, if you know what I mean. Like, not that I'm annoyed that he was in Hawkeye, but I don't feel like the general like tone of that show fit how important Kingpin is to
I fully agree. Actually.
The whole MCU universe. Like, don't get me wrong, it was cool to have him interact with the likes of Clint Barton and Kate Bishop, but really, if he's not going up against one of the bigger guys, then it doesn't. It feels like a bit of a wasted opportunity to bring him in that show, because for me that show was really fun and really entertaining. Was more of a family fun Christmas film, Christmas TV show, that just Home Alone in the MCU. Essentially, for me, that was what it felt like.
That's exactly what I thought.
not too much jeopardy to kind of rock the boat too much, but it did enough to give us a lot of stuff to get behind, like introducing Kate Bishop. Obviously, she's going to be big going forward in the MCU with the Young Avengers. Obviously, Hawkeye being an original G. Still, these are all big things, and we're not downplaying the show at all, but it just seemed like a bit of a waste opportunity, because you could have done something a bit bigger with Kingpin. I'm hoping that it sets it up something bigger, because from what I took from the end of it is that might have been the end of his character, which hopefully, like you've said in the comics, he doesn't die, and he's blind. Fine, I want to keep him as long as I can keep him in the MCU. So I was a bit worried that they brought him in and got rid of him.
I was really hoping which would have been that quick,
because that'd have been the most heartbreaking thing for me, because like you can't bring in someone that good and then just throw them away and dismiss them. Although I will say the exact same thing about Multiverse Madness like about 20 minutes ago. But the thing about the Netflix shows is they can still take place in the MCU easily, because
there was hints and nods.
Yeah, well, them shows always acknowledge stuff that happened in the films. It's just the film didn't acknowledge them. But now there's a great opportunity for them to be able to do that, because they've had the blip. And the good thing about the Netflix shows is they're a bit murky with the timeline of when they take place. They don't really it don't really plant itself solidly at any point in the timeline. I know there's like mild references to certain years, but not like completely. Don't follow like a full timeline like the main MCU does. So it'd be really easy for them to just be like, right, well, they blipped for 5 years,
and then notice
they came back?
Did you notice that the coffee cup in No Way Home was the same coffee cup from Daredevil?
Yeah.
And what
I think it's season 3, isn't it?
Yeah, in season 3 of Daredevil, it was Why can't I think of her name right now?
It's Deborah.
Karen.
Deborah. Yeah, it's Karen. Deborah.
Deborah, you were close. Karen Page. She had the same exact coffee cup from where MJ was now working at, where they couldn't remember Peter, and like they zoomed in on that cup at the end of No Way Home too. So it was kind of cool. Like there's this like weird triangle going on between these shows and movies of like Hawkeye to No Way Home to like the Netflix shows. Now it's like, oh, okay, I can't see it. They're gonna try to bring these Netflix shows to have more relevancy.
Well, if they want to do that, and I'm hoping that they're going to, because if you look at it this way, if they're willing to bring back Matt Murdock and Kingpin, then what's stopping you from bringing back any of them, really?
Right.
But then the only problem they have then is the fact that if they're going to treat the Netflix shows as canon, they really should treat all the other shows as canon, like Runaways, Cloak and Dagger, Agents of Shield.
Right.
Really, like my argument would be that Agents of Shield should have been a higher priority to be part of the MCU canon than the Netflix shows.
Well, I agree.
I mean, Daredevil's a huge character, don't get me wrong, but like Agents of Shield it built its own little universe that could easily just slot back into the MCU now, because there's loads of points where it divots away from the main MCU because of time travel or different universes and stuff, and there's no reason why it can't just be slotted back in and then just be considered as canon.
And the crazy thing about that too is that, like, you know, with like all the opportunities of like the multiverse coming back and like being branched out and being open, is like now there's that possibility for like those Runaways and Agents of Shield and all that stuff. So I think that what you're wanting is going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping so, and I'm hoping, and I'm just hoping the actors that played these roles in these other shows are willing to want to do that. Like, it'd be amazing for me to see someone like Quake come into the MCU, and obviously Phil be at least. No, I don't think obviously they can't really interact with him again because he's a Chronicon, whatever he is at the moment. He's not a human being, but it'd be good to even acknowledge the fact that they knew he existed and that he didn't actually die. Like, even in Secret Invasions, if Nick Fury mentioned something in passing about him, that'd be a good nod to the fact that we know that that's part of the MCU. Like, even if he said something like, "Oh well, the Avengers initiative did actually have some positives from it because we had a fallen Avenger who actually became back, because in the show they classified him as an Avenger because they used that whatever." They healed him, didn't they? With the is it Skrull? It's not Skrull, is it? It's Kree blood, isn't it? Yeah, they bring him back with Kree blood and then they erase his memory. But that was part of the Fallen Avenger protocol. So as long as even if they like just mention that in the show, that kind of stuff is just enough for me. But going back to the Netflix ones, just having Kingpin being that was such an important thing. But it just, for me, it felt like it should have been put in a different project. But I think they probably did that because they saw an opportunity to sync everything up. Like they purposely made sure that that episode came out the same day as Spider-Man No Way Home, or the same week for you guys. It came out the same day for us, but it came out the same week. So again, I understand the importance of why they did it, and I just feel like it could have been done in a better show. Maybe She-Hulk, depending on what the tone of the show is, or having been No Way Home. But I suppose they've got different shooting schedules and stuff, with it being a Sony project as opposed to a Marvel Studios project. So what I'm trying to say is I'm happy that he's back, but it just felt a bit. Sometimes it felt a bit lackluster for me. But I think that's my biggest criticism of Hawkeye in general. Really, it just wasn't quite as epic as it probably could have been. You had all the right ingredients for it, but it didn't deliver on all parts. Some of it was funny, enjoyable, a bit emotional at times, and introduced some great characters, brought back some even better characters, but just never seemed to really hit another level for me.
The highlights of it for me, I would say, were definitely Haley Stanfield. She crushed it as Kate Bishop, and she was fantastic in every scene that she was in. She played the role to perfection.
Yeah.
And like everybody really did, up until like the Kingpin stuff, because that's a little convoluted. But like Clint Barton, like I was getting kind of annoyed with some of like Marvel fans because they were like, oh well, like why is Hawkeye being played in such like a negative way? And I was like, well, you got to think about like how much this guy's lost. You know, he lost his best friend in Nat. He had to watch her die in the Endgame, and like he's already lost his family. He got them back, but then like he lost his best friend, like who he did missions with all the time, and he had to like fight her to the death, literally, to watch her die and for him to live. So it was kind of one of those things where like when Yelena came into the show, she was a scene stealer. She was absolutely fantastic. I can't wait for more. I can't wait for more Yelena, played by Florence Pugh. She's great.
Yeah, she is.
Like she was one of those characters you're like, oh man, like I know she's trying to kill Hawkeye, but like I don't know why I love her. Like she's great. And like they even reference that like in the scene where her and Kate are running down the halls, where she's like, please stop making me like you, and then she jumps out of the window. So it was so well done. And then the one scene I thought was the best scene of the entire show, because I like stuff that goes on like a deeper scale or a deeper level, is when Clint, he's so done with the concept of Ronin. He wants that person to be dead. And when he goes to the bridge where the Avengers had their standoff, and he takes the hearing aid out, which I loved how they incorporated that he now has bad hearing. They're like, why do you have such bad hearing? And they did that little compilation of like like just all these explosions and stuff. I was laughing so hard when I was watching it, because it was so funny. And like it was like the quickest 5-second wrap up of like an answer to a question.
Yeah.
And I was like, but it was accurate, you know, like he's been through so much, like with loud explosions and everything. So it makes sense that he has bad hearing, and he is human. He's not powered like some of the other Avengers are.
Yeah.
With like suits of armor and stuff. Like he's just him with a bow and arrow. So I loved when he took the hearing aid off, and it was kind of like him taking a moment to like turn the crowd off, because even in our lives, like I feel like we have those moments where like we feel like everything around us is so loud that we can't like pin down our own thoughts. And when he took the hearing aid out, that was one of the most like emotional scenes for me to connect with the show, to where it was like him being able to try to tune out the world and everything else that he hears and sees, just so he can take a moment to himself and collect his thoughts, and talk to a lost loved one that he really misses, and is like, like, forgive me for what I'm about to do, because obviously he knows Widow would not have wanted him to go back to being Ronin. But and then like leading into that scene where he had the chance to kill Echo, he didn't. He just told her the truth and was like, I had no intention of killing your father. Like, this is what happened. I'm not going to hurt you. And then he kind of like, he did that a couple times. Like when he fought Yelena, he didn't really fight back. Because that like with his experience with Natasha, that he probably could have handled Yelena pretty well if he needed to, because he's very experienced. And Yelena's a little bit younger, So, and he's been on bigger missions than Yelena has. So I felt like he could have really like done some damage if he wanted to in that fight scene. But he decided to just kind of like almost in that fight scene, like restrain her and be like, I'm trying to tell you, I did not kill your sister. So there was like, I felt like Jeremy Renner really stole the show, which he should have had to steal the show because it was his show.
Yeah.
But like, I felt like he really stole the show in some of those scenes where like it showed like how much he did care about Natasha, and like how much he misses her, and how much that like has really wore down on him as like a character and his emotional process. So seeing that scene where he took the hearing aid out just to shut the world out for a minute and then put it back in was It was deep. And then I thought it was really funny when he took the hearing aid out so that he didn't have to listen to Kate talk for 2 hours at a time.
Yeah, when they're having breakfast and just after he's got it fixed, and she's talking to him, and then he just cuts back in and goes, "Can I have some more coffee?" And it's like, you have to listen
so
the whole
funny.
time. It's just grumpy old man Hawkeye,
Yeah.
isn't it? That's all it is.
Yeah. What did you think
good.
about the rest of it?
Yeah, I thought it was good. It was fun. I like the fact that they completely had us with Jack as well. Like,
yeah, I like Jack.
100% thought he was a bad guy. Turns out not a bad guy, just a really good fighter. I enjoyed one of the things I really enjoyed about the show was the LARPers. I thought that was really cool, really fun, and that I think it was that episode 3 where he goes to the LARPers and he's actually joining in and stuff like that. Fun, them characters, a lot of comic relief, so they added another level to it. Yelena Belova, Florence was just. She just everything she
so
touches
good.
turns to gold, and I can't wait for her to be in more MCU stuff. I'm not sure what the next project she'll be in is, but I'm excited to see her in it. And yeah, Jeremy Renner he did what he was told to do, and I liked the angle of him being just. It seems like the granddad of the MCU now, because. Essentially, apart from Thor, he's the only real OG that's on Earth.
Yeah.
Just taking care of business. Like he loses Tony, he loses Cap, he loses Natasha.
He's lost a lot.
You've got Banner, but obviously Banner's obviously not just going to be knocking around. Depending on what is going on with his green state, we don't really know where he's at because. That Shang-Chi post-credit scene would have you believe that he's not in his smart Hulk form, but
which I was grateful for.
I'm assuming She-Hulk is going to explain a bit more of that. I hope it does anyway because that was a bit confusing. But yeah, it just seems like Hawkeye is just the solo OG Avenger, just being the elder statesman, in fact, of the MCU, just parting wisdom wherever he can. But trying to stay out of trouble as much as he can, but obviously you can't really always do that. So yeah, I'd say it was a solid show. Not the best one, but a very, very solid way to end the year for the MCU in relation to TV shows. So let's move on to the main event. The pinnacle of my existence, I'd call this film. No, it's not really. To be fair, this film was incredible, and Michael's going to have a quick costume change. Here he is, the friendly 9-year-old Spider-Man himself. Oh man, that is a good mask. We spoke about this before we went on. That's such an impressive. Does it fog up pretty quickly, that mask, or not?
Oh yeah, I can barely see.
That's the problem with them. That's the problem with them masks, unfortunately. That's unless you get like a proper one made by some of these suit makers, then you can't get these removable lenses. None of my suits have removable lenses as well. But one day I will fork out a lot of money for a proper suit.
We'll do it together. We'll do it together.
Yeah. For anyone listening to the podcast, Michael has put on a Tobey Maguire Spider-Man mask, and it looks good. It looks good on you, man. It looks good on you.
Thanks, man.
Shooting webs all over the shop. So Spider-Man No Way Home. The hype around this film has been the biggest since Infinity War / Endgame for me, in terms of any film, really. And I don't think it really just stopped with us superhero film fans. I think this is one of these films that kind of transcends genre and people's expectations and like people's age and all kinds of stuff. Like the amount of people that I know have watched this film who really don't like superhero films, don't give a shit about them. is very high, and the appreciation of the film seems to be off the scale. I'm not sure what like the IMDb rating and the Rotten Tomato ratings are at the moment, but at one point it was 100% and on both, and it was 9.6 on IMDb, which is the highest rated film of all time, after Shawshank Redemption, which is a 9.2. Like, this is a superhero film that seems to have just raised the game for any film ever. It's, for me, it's near perfect. I can't think of anything that will come anywhere near as close as this. If Multiverse of Madness comes anywhere near this, then I'll be shocked. But for me, it's probably my favorite film of all time, and that's beating Infinity War, because that was my favorite film of all time. I know it's a superhero film, doesn't matter. They had so much things to put in that film and so many people to put in that film, and it just delivered so well on every single aspect of it.
Oh yeah.
So having the return of another Marvel Netflix show character, the Daredevil, Matt Murdock, appears in this film.
Matt freaking Murdock.
Incredible. I was probably just as excited about seeing Matt Murdock than I was about seeing Spider-Man.
Our theater blew up.
I was like, it was insane that, like,
when the cane hit the ground, our theater and when he caught the brick, our theater was like screaming. It was so fun.
Oh man, that sounds well good. I mean, I went to the 2:00 in the afternoon showing on the Wednesday, which was like the second showing that I could get to. The first one was I was at work, so I couldn't talk to it. But that's the earliest possible showing. There must have been about 10 people in the cinema. So I yelped at all the moments you'd expect people to yelp. No one else made a sound. It was just me getting overexcited about it. But then second time I watched it was the day after. In an IMAX theater, and
the way it should be.
That was more like it, where people were losing their mind, and I'm just sat there before everything happens, just like smirking, being like, "Oh, the place is going to lit up when this happens. The place is going to lit up when this happens." And people, to be fair, people lost their minds when Matt turned up, and they've got every right to be. Like, Charlie Cox returning as Daredevil
so good.
was just another level for me. And then obviously you have the return of Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield as past iterations of Spider-Man, along with the villains from the universes. What more could anybody want from a film than
I couldn't answer that.
some of the best villains that you've seen in Spider-Man films, as well as all three cinematic live-action Spider-Men. I mean, it just, if you'd have sat me down when I was 7 or 8 years old and said, when you're in your 30s, you're going to watch a film that has 3 different Spider-Men in it, as well as the villains from Spider-Man 2 and films you've not watched yet in the Amazing Spider-Man films, but you'll get to see them all on the same screen. And I'd have been like, who are you? Why are you telling me this? But also, cool. That sounds well good. It's just mad. Just thinking back to when in 2012, the first Avengers film came out, and it was the same year the Amazing Spider-Man came out, and me going to the cinema and seeing the Amazing Spider-Man and being like, it'd be really cool if he was in the same universe as them guys. And now he is, and so's Tobey Maguire. So, well, what more could you want from life, really, apart from that? The highlight for me of that film was the interactions between them three.
Yes.
Anytime them three were on screen was just gold. And not only that,
it was effortless.
It was. It just didn't really, and it should have felt like really.
And they
all have worked, but it did. It really did work.
And they all played like, the way I looked at it was Toby played Toby Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And then Tom played his Spider-Man. And then Andrew, I think, viewed this as like a second chance to like cement himself as a good Spider-Man and not like a questionable one. And like the way Andrew acted in this movie with like 35 minutes of good writing and good script was better than both of his movies combined.
Yeah.
and he ramped up how well he played Spider-Man. Like he stole the scene when he was in it. Like I didn't feel like there's only one time in that movie when I felt like the cockiness that I didn't like from his Spider-Man, and that was in the lab when he's like, I've already cured Dr. Connors once, and both of them they laughed at him. They were kind of they were like, yeah, like, okay, you're kind of cocky. And he's like, and then he corrected himself. He's like, I mean, yeah, like it's cool. I'll take her Dr. Connors. And then he realized that these two were like, that's how I took it. And I'm not saying it's like, the Bible or scripture. Like I'm saying like that's just what it seemed like to me. Like it seemed like he saw that these two were like kind of pretty humble guys, and Andrew was like, oh, I shouldn't have like acted like that.
Yeah.
So I really appreciated like that Andrew got like a second chance to be the Spider-Man that we always knew he was in certain moments of his movies. It just felt like his Spider-Man movies didn't get a trilogy because they weren't that great of movies, to be honest. I just watched them both 2 days, the last 2 days, and it's they're rough. We can get into that if we have time, but yeah, you can keep going. Sorry, I got on a tangent.
No, to be fair, like I do enjoy the Amazing Spider-Man films. They're just the worst ones of all the ones we've had.
Right. They're not bad. They're not bad.
Apart from Spider-Man 3, obviously the original Spider-Man 3. That's not that great. But for me, the Andrew Garfield, he did everything right in that film, and like you said, Tobey Maguire just like it never not being Peter Parker. Just exactly. Walk through the portal and just be like, oh hey, just like really awkward, really so rigid, really like almost very wooden. But again, that's just the way that he portrayed Peter Parker and his Spider-Man. I thought Andrew Garfield I think he brought it, and that's what I've always wanted. That redemption for Andrew Garfield for people, because people are always quick to write him off and be like, yeah, well, he's not the OG of Tobey Maguire, and he's not this like perfect iteration of Spider-Man with Tom Holland, because Tom Holland is just like the best of Tobey Maguire and the best of Andrew Garfield pushed together into this hybrid Spider-Man genius thing. Like the way that Stan Lee described him, saying like, this is exactly how I envisioned Spider-Man and Peter Parker to look and act and be. And Andrew Garfield always gets forgotten about, and because his films weren't that great, he gets dismissed a lot of the times as being a bad Spider-Man, which is truly not the case. He's a fantastic Spider-Man.
He was a great Spider-Man. Yeah.
And he was a better Spider-Man for me than Tobey Maguire was a Spider-Man. Andrew Garfield's a better Spider-Man. Tobey Maguire's a better Peter Parker. So I always knew that Andrew Garfield would do really well in this film, and I would have found it very difficult to comprehend him not showing up and giving 110%, because he loved the character and he loved being Spider-Man. It killed him when the franchise fell apart around him, and he fell out with Sony. And if you ever get a chance to watch that Variety interview that he does, I can't remember who it's with.
He loved playing Spider-Man.
He poured his heart and soul into that, and I think the chance to play him again and to really put his stamp on it and to convince the fans, that all Spider-Man fans, that he was a good Spider-Man. He blew it out. He blew out the water, man. He's fantastic. Good.
While we're on like the subject of the three Spider-Man, like I loved how they created the memes of like them pointing fingers at each other, but like the way I viewed the Spider-Man was, Toby was this guy who was a good Peter Parker, and he was like a very mature Spider-Man, and I always felt like he was like the perfect build muscular wise for like the animated 90s Spider-Man show that I grew up with every Saturday. I thought I agree. He was very much like that attitude Spider-Man, like pretty quirky, but like not all the time, but like he was very much more mature, and he was a great Peter Parker. Garfield, I felt like he failed as like a Peter Parker for a little while, and then once he started really getting in stride of his character, it got better. But then dare I say, I kind of liked the first suit that he had in the first movie better than the second one, even though I know the second one's more comic accurate. I thought his suit was a bold change that they tried. I would have liked to maybe seen his old suit. I liked his old suit with the gold lenses, or like maybe change the gold lenses out with like the white ones, you know. But I thought that his Spider-Man was always really good. It just was a matter of for me, it was like his motivation, like letting these criminals go that weren't Uncle Ben's killer. Like that was not what Spider-Man would do. He'd still apprehend these guys and not just look for a tattoo and let them leave type thing. So that's kind of where I struggled with his Spider-Man, but I did enjoy Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man. And then Tom, I mean, he's just the best of both worlds. And like, he's young. We finally get that teenager Spider-Man in high school that like is supposed to be accurate, and not Toby being like, 25 years old playing a 17-year-old. Like I don't know what the 90s were doing back then, but it was the time to be alive.
It weren't believable, put it that way.
But then like Andrew Spider-Man, like those two, like, so to like keep the conversation short on my end, like Tom and Toby were exactly what they were supposed to be. And I really felt that Andrew, as we've already said, saw this as a second opportunity to maybe give himself a chance for more Spider-Man roles and come back and show the audience like, hey, like those were just two kind of rough cut movies, you know? And the biggest issue I had with those movies entirely was he didn't know what Oscorp really was in the first movie. And then in the second movie, they're like, "Oh well, he's magically best friends with Harry Osborn, the son of the son of the owner of Oscorp." But apparently, he's been gone for 10 years. Like it didn't make sense, you know. And then like Dwayne DeHaan's a good actor, but like, oh man, his Goblin, like I love how like some people use like the scene where he says, "You're a fraud, Spider-Man," and he like throws a table over. Like it's so funny because it's like. It's just such bad acting in that one scene, you know, like it's just not good. And the movies just, they didn't stand up on their own two legs. Because I felt like the first one felt like a very cheap copy of Toby's first Spider-Man movie with like, oh, Uncle Ben, watching Uncle Ben die and all that stuff, and like self-created villain in a lab, you know, with Norman Osborn to Dr. Connors. Like I felt like it was very like bam, 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 and the only ending was that was the only thing that was different was the ending where like Gwen's dad says, hey, like leave Gwen out of this, you know. And then like going into the second movie, you know, Jamie Foxx got that redemption arc for Electro in this movie as well, the same way Andrew did. I loved that. He wasn't blue. They referenced that. They referenced the lame villains that Garfield's movies had. They kept calling Lizard a dinosaur
because he looks like a dinosaur more than a lizard.
And probably they like talked about how like I didn't know the dinosaur could talk. Like it was so funny, and it was just like even like Norman and Dr. Octavius were like just taken back by like this other world of villains that just weren't that great, and they were like, huh. Okay, like who are these guys, you know? So it was kind of nice to see how like Sony and Marvel like collectively attacked this issue of like Andrew's movies not being the best compared to the other ones, and acknowledging it and making fun of it for like the 1 to 2 minutes they had, like Andrew being like, oh, I'm lame, and Toby's like, no man, you're amazing. Like it was so cool. Like that's how I kind of viewed the 3 Spider-Man thing. I thought it was perfect.
Yeah, it was, and it delivered on all accounts for that stuff. What did you think about the arc of Aunt May? Obviously, she delivers a variation of the famous line. She dies in the film. Do you think that was something that needed to happen in this trilogy?
Yeah. So after the first couple trailers came out, I sat down with a buddy of mine. We were getting dinner, and we were just like talking about the movie and how excited we were, and like predictions. And then I gave him my prediction I kid you not. Like, I wish that I would have told you this because then it's more believable. But like, I sat down with him and I was like, so from what I've seen in the trailer, and as someone who like tends to kind of take notes on these things when I'm watching the shows and the trailers and like podcasts about them and all that, I was like, I'm willing to bet that Aunt May is going to die and that she's going to say with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
And my friend was like, why do you think that? I said, I just think that like from the trailer, the way it's cut is we see the goblin bomb being thrown. We see a clip of Norman on his glider holding it. And then we see a shot of Aunt May in an area full of rubble. And we see a shot of Tom trying to bat the grenade out of the way. So I was like, this doesn't bode well for Aunt May. And I said, and we haven't heard the with great power comes great responsibility line yet for this Peter Parker. And we could assume that Ben said it, but maybe Aunt May says it in the movie. Like, do you really think they'd like do a Spider-Man movie where like a Spider-Man story arc where like with great power comes great responsibility doesn't get said, just a little bit worded different? And he's like, yeah, I hope that's not the case. But so when I was sitting in the theater, I was absolutely bawling. And I was so sad that I was right, because that scene was just here. That was with how close I was to my aunt. Like, I get it. So I was like crying in the theater. I was like, oh my God, like this is so sad. Like, because he's literally like going to hold her till she's gone. And then obviously he doesn't get time to process it because they start shooting at him. So
yeah, it's a proper tear-jerking moment. That I'm just a bit gutted that Aunt May is not going to be in the MCU anymore, because she's mint and she's been great throughout the whole trilogy. It's been like a breath of fresh air to have it from a different storyline, like with it being Aunt May instead of Uncle Ben. I thought she did a fantastic job of shaping this Peter Parker into the Peter Parker that he is. And it does kind of make a bit more sense now with where they are with the MCU, though, or with Spider-Man in the MCU, because with the fact that no one really knows who he is now, they couldn't have had that loose thread, could they really? They couldn't have had, no one's going to know who you are, not even your Aunt May. Like, Aunt May is the only person that, well, in the family I've got left. Like, you can't not have that the only loose thread. That'd be awful, because he tells obviously Ned and MJ that they're going to forget him, and Doctor Strange obviously knows he's going to forget him because he does the spell. But it would have been too weird for her to survive that, go to hospital, he never sees her again, and then she's like, "Why am I in hospital? Like, what's happened here?" Like, it would have been a bit too crazy. I'm gutted that she's gone though, because she's mint, but it also, I felt like it needed to happen.
Yeah, like, and the other thing too with like, I love what the MCU did with that moment where they didn't pan on Andrew's Spider-Man, they panned in on Tobey's Spider-Man. When Tom's, he's like, I can still hear her voice in my head, like even after everything that these villains just did, like she still said we made the right decision. And then she said with great power, and then Tobey was like, comes great responsibility. And then I felt like what the MCU was doing with that to kind of like tie everything together, where it makes more sense for like the whole multiverse concept, is that when that line is said to Spider-Man, this is an absolute point in time that Doctor Strange hates, like with Christine dying, right? It's the same thing with Spider-Man's life, where whether it's Aunt May or whether it's Uncle Ben that says it to him, the second that line is said to him, his Aunt May or Uncle Ben is absolutely confirming their death as an absolute point in Spider-Man's story arc or his life in any universe. Like, it's not going to matter. Like, that's just doing yourself in right there, because it's so important for Peter to hear that, because otherwise he could use his powers for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, because he's got his voice of reason and his point of reference, and her whole thing was to help people, obviously with the inclusion of Feast in the MCU, which the other two the version of Spider-Man didn't have. I thought it worked really, really well, and yeah, it was definitely a very, very sad moment, but again, it served a purpose and made the final act a bit more of an intense one, because even when you lead up to the bit where Tom Holland is about to go at Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin with the glider, and Tobey Maguire stops him, like it. Yeah, I think without that final bit, there's no redemption for Green Goblin, is there? Because obviously at the end it gets fixed, because you can't have had him not get fixed, but then how would you be able to explain a way that they'd be able to defeat him? Because Goblin was an absolute menace throughout the film, and
he was.
Willem Dafoe was so good. That bit in the apartment block where Tom Holland's like punching him, and every time the fist comes up, his face just gets his smile gets wider and wider, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, this is intense, man. It's insane how good it was.
And the crazy thing about that is it shows you how much Spider-Man pulls those punches and fights. Because if he didn't, he would just absolutely murder everybody he apprehended or fought. It's just, that's the truth of it. And you watch him in that scene, you can see him in my head, you can see him slowly amping up how hard he's hitting Goblin, because he doesn't want to, he wants to help him still, because Aunt May is like, hey, you're making the right choice. But when he's dropping the elbows, when he starts throwing bows on him, I'm like, oh my God, how is this guy not split open? And when he pile drives him into force, I don't know how many stories it was, 4 or 5 stories, when he pile drives him down, and he's literally God, it just shows you how much Spider-Man pulls his punches. And even Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man said I don't want you to become like me, where I stopped pulling my punches. Because that just tells you that his Spider-Man went down a very dark path past the Amazing Spider-Man 2 after he lost Gwen and everybody else. Because he says, after I lost Gwen and Michael Ben and all this, he's like, I stopped pulling my punches. I stopped caring. I became bitter. I became vengeful. It shows you in that moment, Tom's really still trying to just apprehend him versus really hurt him, versus the second fight where he is absolutely just beating the tar out of him. And when he webbed Goblin's foot to the ground, I was like, oh, that's a dirty trick, because Toby's never done that to him. And then and then I also love when Toby got shot in the face with webs by Andrew, and he's like oh, gross. Oh, gross. He close it up. It's so funny, because I think if you go back and watch those movies, I think at one point you can see where somebody gets webbed in the face and they say gross, because I'm pretty sure that's what that was referencing, because I briefly remember, I could be wrong, but it was just funny to see Spider-Man getting webbed in the face by another Spider-Man and being like, oh, this is disgusting.
Yeah, that's what they did so well, though. It was the right balance between fan service, really good, clever writing, and just amazing action and plot, just all being mixed into one perfectly formed film. So with the way that it was left, with the spell being cast over the Earth by Doctor Strange, where no one remembers that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. They know who Spider-Man is. Spider-Man's obviously a person, because Happy references him at the end, and J. Jonah Jameson references him after the incident on the Statue of Liberty. So where do you think this is going to go with this MCU version of Spider-Man? Because they've completely stripped him of his knowledge of any of the Avengers and anything in this universe, essentially. So essentially, he lives in this universe, in the MCU, but he's not attached to anything now. Does that mean that we think he's going to be just completely removed from that universe in the next either Sony film or the next trilogy with that Tom Holland Spider-Man? Because for me, it could perfectly be set up for him to just be plucked straight out of the MCU and just put into the Sony universe by Madam Web or someone like that. So then he's left the MCU and he's in the Sony universe now. Or do we think that there's still a way that Spider-Man can still exist in this MCU going forward without being known as Peter Parker?
So in my head, I don't think I thought the same thing right when I left the movie theater. I was like, I really hope this isn't Sony trying to like pull out of this deal, because Spider-Man's such an integral part of the MCU now. And like you said it too, where like the world knows who Spider-Man is. They even say Spider-Man this, Spider-Man that, but they just don't know he's Peter Parker anymore, including his friends and Happy and Aunt May. So I'm not gonna water it down. Like it's sad, but like at the same time, like his life's drastically not that different, other than losing Ned and MJ. To be honest, obviously Aunt May's dead, and then Happy still knows Spider-Man. He still says, I knew her through Spider-Man. So I think there's a window there that's still saying that maybe like Spider-Man is part of the Avengers and no one knows who he is. Because from my understanding with it is that Tom Holland signed on for 6 more films, one being a trilogy, and then 3 of those films of the 6 are probably going to be Avengers movies.
Yeah,
but would be my guess. So as much as I hate to say it, I think that like when it finally comes time to be an Avengers movie, like maybe like Nick Fury or somebody like unfolds the concept that Spider-Man is Peter Parker and the rest of the Avengers kind of have like a 5-minute scene where they're like, what, like, what, he's a kid. Like they kind of have like the whole, like, he's just a kid type thing. But then they kind of like slowly like let the Avengers know who he is, but that's all who's going to, that's everyone who's going to know who he is. I do think that Ned and MJ will eventually figure it out too. Because there was, if you noticed, MJ was still wearing the Black Dahlia, the broken piece. In the coffee shop. She was still wearing it. And then Peter like finished her sentence for her where he said, if you expect disappointment, you won't be disappointed. And she kind of gave him a look after he said that. And like she's like, I know you from somewhere. And we all know that Michelle Jones is very smart, and she figured it out the first time, like she said, and at the end, like, I'll just figure it out again. I do think there's a foreshadowing that she'll figure it out again. My biggest thing is I really hope they don't make Ned Hobgoblin. Like I know it's a big rumor. Yeah. Like I don't want Ned to be Hobgoblin. I think what they're gonna do with Ned is Ned's gonna become a sorcerer. Like because Lola, his sweet grandma or aunt or whatever she was to him. Can you get the cobweb up in the corner for me, please? Like then Peter, like Toby gave her a little wave, Lola and all of them were like, oh, well, there's magic runs in our family. I get tingling sensations in my fingers. And even Strange even said, did you just open a portal? And then he's like, yeah. And he's like, And he just walks past, so I do think they're going to make Ned a sorcerer. Maybe you could play it out as like Ned gets taken under by Doctor Strange to learn sorcery. And then Ned's really good at it. And then he finds a spell where he can like somewhat bring someone's memory back, and then him and MJ can remember, because maybe he figures out who Peter is. He's like, oh man, like, and he goes and finds Peter, and then like unwipe MJ. So I don't think any of that stuff's permanent. I do think we're gonna see all these 3 together at some point again, and maybe Secret Wars for an Avengers movie. But I think Tom is not done in the MCU. I think that the Avengers know who Spider-Man is. I bet you Spider-Man is still an Avenger because Happy Hogan knows who he is, and Happy Hogan is like in charge of the Avengers Tower and everything. So I'm guessing that Happy Hogan still knows who Spider-Man is, but he doesn't know who Peter Parker is. I was very scared of this too, as well. As you can tell, I've had a lot of time to think about this, of how that movie ended. So I do think the future's bright for Tom to be in the MCU, and like I just also think logistically, there's too much money to be lost if Sony plucks him, which I think they tried to pluck him after Far From Home. And the funny thing about that is the world rioted. They said, we're not going to another Sony movie, another Sony project until Spider-Man is back in the MCU. And that was just after Far From Home. So I think that Tom's coming back. But what do you think? I've talked enough.
I hope he does come back. It wouldn't make a lot of sense for him to sign on 3 more MCU produced Sony films for him to just not have any interaction with any MCU characters. It just didn't really seem to make a lot of sense when you think about what the post credit scenes, what really struck me about it though, because they were like, well, what's the point in bringing Venom into this universe to then take him immediately out of the universe, but leave a bit of Venom behind, as in a bit of the actual symbiote behind? Because does that mean that Tom Hardy will be in this MCU film as Venom, or will that take over someone else? Will the symbiote take over Ned? Do we like? Who really knows? Well, in fact, it'd probably be better to take over Flash, wouldn't it? Flash would be a better character to take over. But again, no offense to Tony Ravioli, whatever he's called, Tony Rivoli.
Yeah.
I can't imagine him being a very good bad guy.
No,
not that he's a bad actor; he's a decent actor, but I don't think that is where they're going to go with it.
I felt like he played Flash the way he was told to play Flash, and it worked. For this setting, movies being a high school setting, but I don't want Tom Hardy. Here's the thing: I like Tom Hardy's Venom, but I don't think the movies are that great. Anything that Sony does on their own, I don't really give a shit about. As bad as that sounds to say, just be upfront about it. I don't like it. I don't like what Sony's done with some of their products on their own. No one really cares to see a Morbius movie. I'm not gonna lie. No one really cares to see a Morbius movie on his own. No one cares to see Venom on his own or Black Cat on their own. Like this Spider-Verse they're doing over there. It needs to be scrapped. I think they're starting to see that, even though these movies are coming out. Like Kraven the Hunter. I don't care to see a Kraven the Hunter origin story on a villain. I don't like.
Even if they did include Spider-Man in this universe, so if they did manage to find a way of plucking this Tom Holland out of the MCU and putting him in the Sony Spider-Verse, would that be something that you'd be more willing to have involved?
I'd be more open to
I think Tom Holland will be in Morbius.
I think he'll show up.
I think he will. It makes sense for him to be there. If Michael Keaton's Vulture's going to be in that universe, then
also.
Why not have Tom Holland?
Also, Tobey's Spider-Man will show up too, I think.
Possibly.
Because if in the trailer they have a picture of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man with the murderer over it, but that could be a Photoshop edit too, like the trailer be like it's actually Tom's Spider-Man. So who knows if they're gonna do? I'm not saying the movies are all trash because they're not. It's just they're not as good as what the MCU does with the character of Spider-Man, and it's frustrating when you see a product be underwhelming compared to what you know what it can be. Yeah,
no, that makes sense. I see what you mean with that. So, to round off this podcast, this epic discussion we've had throughout the last, I'd say it's been about 2 hours we've been in this pod, which is good. It's a very long, very good and long podcast. So, what are your hopes for Spider-Man going forward? So, like you said, you don't really want to be a Sony thing.
Right.
What do you want to see this version of Spider-Man do in the MCU then? What's your hope for the next solo Spider-Man film? Do you want a Sinister Six? Do you want a Spider-Man versus another person, or do you want just a continuation of the story that is on so far? So like adjusting to his new just vigilante knocking around on his own friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
So for me, a lot of my expectations were met in this original trilogy that they did. And the way I view this trilogy is kind of an origin story of how we got the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. The skilled friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, not just a kid anymore. He's experienced. Like, he's battle worn. He knows how to adapt into fights now. And I think Spider-Man has such an iconic set of villains. He has a good villains gallery, and I really think that that the door is more open than it's ever been for a new trilogy of him in college now. I don't want to see Dr. Connors again, but I'm guessing it probably will at some point in the trilogy, which would be fine because Dr. Connors is a good villain. But maybe some Kingpin action to kind of like revitalize that character in the MCU. But like the way I viewed this last trilogy was we saw him go from being, in all of his appearances, from being just a kid, not knowing how to use his powers, to being recruited, to being wanting to be one of the big guys. And then all of a sudden he realizes, oh man, like, I'm not ready for this. I want to be just a kid and far from home. And he goes on his vacation, all that stuff. And he realizes now that with his powers, he can't just be a kid anymore. So then he grows into being a hero. But then in No Way Home, he learns the ultimate sacrifice that needs to be made for the sake of the world and the multiverse and all that. So he allows Doctor Strange to cast a new spell where obviously everybody forgets him. So I think there was that we got to see somehow in a trilogy. It's basically an origin trilogy for him leading into his college years. So I'd like to see a couple of like villains that we least expect from the MCU to throw in there eventually. And I don't know which ones I want off the top of my head right now. But I know that some of that's coming probably. And then obviously the team up films with Secret Wars, I want to see more Toby and Andrew showing up and a little bit more use of the multiverse. But that's kind of what I want. I do want to see Tom in the MCU. Like that's as far as I can go on that, is I know that much.
Yeah, I agree. I want Tom to stay in the MCU, but I also do want him to go into the Sony universe. I want him to interact with the likes of Venom and Morbius and
that final suit though.
So good, so good, so good. Although it's not as nice as the suit that he has when he gets the tiny bit of nano back from Doc Ock in the apartment when he gets the gold.
Integrated. Yeah.
Little hint into what's going to be added to the wall behind me.
I think
that suit's coming in 4 days.
Nice. I think I want that homemade suit that he made at the end. Like with
it is nice.
It's so like it for me. It was like ripped straight out of a comic book. And then the last thing I'm going to say before I let you close is I loved how they had like each Spider-Man have a specific stance. Like when they land on the Statue of Liberty. So like you saw Toby is kind of like just like what I was referenced earlier, like the 90s Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, who sits on the top of the S, like in that cross position. And then you saw Tom do his pretty signature stance, and you saw Andrew kind of have his unorthodox stance, which they all kind of had their own thing, which I still loved. That was good.
It was incredible. And this has been incredible. We're going to leave it there for this episode because it's been a long one, and I'm going to let Michael get on with the rest of the day because it's like in the middle of the day for you over there in the US.
5:15.
Yeah. 5:15. Yeah, so it's almost 11:15 over here. So I'm gonna let you get on with the rest of the day. I've got this podcast to edit, so we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us again, Michael. Do you want to let the guys know where to find you on the platforms, the socials, and on Twitch?
Sure. I've been taking some time off, guys, but I'm going to be back on Twitch a little bit more. I took care of some mental health and some physical health issues over the last probably 3-4 months. So you can find me at Twitch TV /the AvengNerd. I do gaming streams. I'm streaming Guardians of the Galaxy currently, kind of on and off when I get time. I have a fantasy football podcast called Nerd Sports Home with John and Mike with a friend of mine that lives in LA. We do that typically every Tuesday or Wednesday. And we're still going to not even though the fantasy football season is done, we are going to be still discussing press issues and media news and all stuff on the seasons, and we're going to try and cover other sports. So that's That's on Spotify as well. The one podcast I haven't gotten to do a whole lot of is the Nerd Rebellion podcast. It's also on Spotify, where we talk about pop culture shows, just like that MCU guy. And I've had that MCU guy on that podcast before, talking about Loki. So we're gonna be trying to build some panels for that. So that's something to look forward to. And that Twitter is at NerdAvenge, at capital NERD, and then capital AVENG. That's where you can find me.
Thank you very much, Michael. Well, I always a pleasure having you on, and make sure you do follow him on the socials and listen to them podcasts, because he's a good dude and he knows a lot of stuff. It does our Michael.
Thanks for having me back.
No, it's totally fine. You can also find me on socials, that MCU Guy, everything apart from Twitter, that MCU Guy UK, YouTube is that MCU Guy UK, Twitch, that MCU Guy. Etsy, there's some new t-shirts dropping this week. I've got the Black Widow lines coming out this week. And just the MCU podcast. And I Twitch every Monday, drops a new episode of the Spider-Man walkthrough today as well. So we'll go over to YouTube or Twitch and check that out as well. So all that's left to say now is goodbye. Thank you, Michael, again.
Thanks for having me.
I can't wait to speak to you again soon. Okay. See you later, guys. Thank you.
See you guys.
Bye.
This podcast is part of the That Thing You Might Like network. Here's something you might like. Find us on socials at TTYL Network.